At the end of the Second World War, all the way up to the end of the 20th century, the Cold War between the West and the East shaped policy all over the world, including Zambia and our own decisions. Not only that, but when it came down to the end of the 20th century, the government style of Zambia changed from a one-party state to a movement for multi-party democracy. In this segment, we're going to be revolving around questions that deal with just that. Let's begin our questions with focusing on our panel.
Dr. Mwaanga, you served as Zambia's ambassador to the Soviet Union during the Cold War, while Zambia also maintained important relations with the United States of America. During your time as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Henry Kissinger's visit to Lusaka also placed South Africa's liberation struggle on the global diplomatic agenda, addressing the apartheid. At a time when the world was divided between East and West, how did Zambia engage both sides without losing its independence, principles, or commitment to African liberation?
That's a very important question. We became independent at a time when the Cold War between the East and the West led by the Americans, the East by the Soviet Union, as it was then called, was really at its hottest. And we didn't want to get caught up in the conflict they had in the Cold War. We didn't want any Cold War involvement. And that is why we decided to support a policy and to enunciate a policy of non-alignment, namely that we didn't want to be aligned to the East or to the West. We wanted to be aligned to ourselves so that we make decisions which are in our best interest. What the Soviet Union and the United States were fighting for was influence and power. We were fighting to develop ourselves as a country, and we couldn't afford to be involved in a Cold War which was meaningless for us and which was not going to bring any benefits to us. So we maintained good relations with both, and we made sure that the relations were correct so that we could deal with both the East and the West on equal terms without appearing to favor any one or each one of them. And that is what compelled us to adopt a policy of non-alignment. Non-alignment meaning that we were going to make decisions which were in our own best interest, not in the best interest of others. And I think that that policy has served us well, and we've maintained that policy since we became independent. The non-aligned group is a very big and influential group in the United Nations. It's the biggest group in the United Nations, and whoever wants to have any resolutions or decisions adopted in the General Assembly, you need the support of the non-aligned group. If you don't have the support of the non-aligned group, you won't get the resolution passed. And I think that we made the right decision by staying in non-aligned and being friends with both the East and the West. Well, I was ambassador at the United Nations for 4 years, and I was ambassador before that at the Soviet Union. And I also, from 1965 up to 66, and I had what is called in diplomacy extra accreditation I was also accredited on a non-resident basis to Poland, Czechoslovakia, as it was then called, East Germany, and Yugoslavia. So we couldn't afford to have embassies everywhere, but extra accreditation normally serves that purpose. And I established good relations with Henry Kissinger, who was, first of all, he was a special assistant to the President of the US. Then he became Secretary of State of the United States, or Foreign Minister in short. And I was also foreign minister when he was foreign minister. And we worked very closely together with them because we wanted the support of the United States government to pressurize the apartheid regime in South Africa to end apartheid so that the majority can also participate in issues of governance. And I ended up inviting Henry Kissinger to come to Zambia, which he did. And from here, he went from here to South Africa, where he made a statement that apartheid had a limited lifespan and that the United States was working with other countries to ensure that there was a broadly based government formed in South Africa which would end the apartheid system. So it's those were challenging days, but they were important days because they produced very important results which still have a bearing on relations between us and those countries today in the 21st century. So I think that we have lived through very interesting times, and we must continue to maintain these relationships because they're important for the future. That's why international diplomacy then becomes important, because for Zambia, being located where we are, we were surrounded by countries which were not independent. South Africa, Zimbabwe, Southern Rhodesia as it was called, Southwest Africa now called Namibia, Angola, Mozambique, they were not independent, and they relied on support mainly from us. And the frontline states, as we were called then, that was Tanzania, ourselves, and Botswana, to support their struggle so that they could also gain independence. Our motto then was that for as long as every inch of the African continent was not liberated from colonialism and apartheid, none of us should feel free. And we did not feel free, and we worked towards that. On Chilumburu Road, we set up a liberation center. We set up a liberation center there where all these liberation movements from neighboring countries were housed. We looked after their housing needs, their educational needs. We looked after their food. We provided money for them to enable them to organize their citizens who had fled their countries because of oppression. At no time did we live in this country without refugees from neighboring countries, whether it was from these 5 countries I've mentioned or from Congo or Zaire, whichever name it was. It has changed names so many times during the last several years. We had thousands of refugees living here from neighboring countries because we couldn't throw away refugees if they were afraid that if they went to their countries, their lives would be in danger. So we accommodated them in the spirit of African brotherhood. Zambia's contribution is second to none on the African continent in terms of the struggle that we waged to get southern African countries liberated. Some of the constitutional conferences were even held here. The Constitutional Conference for Mozambique was held here. Samora Machel and Chissano, who was then, he became foreign minister, later on president after Chissano. The meeting was held here, and I received the foreign minister of Portugal here when the talks started. I was foreign minister, and I received him here. And the talks were held here and concluded here. And we gave Chissano the plan, a Zambia Air Force plan, to take him to Maputo the first day he was assuming office as prime minister, to take over as prime minister before the system changed to presidency. We together with the Frelimo officials and security officials and our own security, we gave them plans to go there and establish the role. The same happened. We had to host talks for Angola, although in the final analysis, because MPLA which was the main party, still the main party in Angola, had split into 3 factions. There was one faction which was led by Dr. Augustino Neto, which was the main faction of MPLA. Dr. Augustino Neto was the leader. And they had very strange names for each other. That one was called the Actual Direction of MPLA. Then we had a faction which was called the Eastern Revolt, which was based here in Zambia, in Northwestern Province, based there, which was led by a guy called Chipinde. And Chipinde faction was called the Eastern Revolt. It was called the Eastern Revolt. And then we had another faction which was led by a man called Dr. De Andrade, which was based in Brazzaville, in Congo-Brazzaville. So when time came for independence discussions to be held, the Portuguese said to us, "Who do you want us to talk to? Your people are split. You have to tell us what we need to do. Would have liked to have the talks now so that we can conclude this topic," because there also had been a change in Portugal, where the government of Salazar and the other dictators had been removed by a group of young officers, young military officers who had taken over. They said that they wanted to end colonialism, and they wanted the discussions to be held, but our people were split. One group based here, the other one in Dar es Salaam, the other one in Brazzaville. So the OAU and President Kaunda, they said, no, let's send an envoy to meet the Brazzaville group, meet the group in Dar es Salaam, and also deal with the group that was in Zambia to find out if they can get together, even for purposes of convenience, so that they can negotiate, the Portuguese can negotiate with one group. So I was sent together, I was leading the delegation, and which comprised the executive secretary of the OAU Liberation Committee, which was based in Dar es Salaam. And he traveled with me and my officials. We went to Brazzaville, and we met with Dr. De Andrade and his group, and we stressed the importance of them working together. We met the group, the Eastern Revolt, which was here. We met Dr. Neto's group in Dar es Salaam, and there was some tentative agreement that they would negotiate as one group, which they finally did, and independence was granted, but then they again went their separate ways, to the point where when the commissioner, the Portuguese High Commissioner in Angola, when he was leaving, instead of departing the country for good, handing over independence, he would have said, I'm handing over power to this president. He said at the airport, I'm handing over power to the people of Angola. And he jumped on the plane and left. Then the fighting broke out between MPLA and UNITA. The fighting continued until again the OAU appointed me as special envoy to promote negotiations between the Angolans, among the Angolans, the group which was based in Luanda, and the group which had split and gone to into the rural part of Bailundu. In Bailundu, which was where Dr. Augustino Neto, the head of UNITA, was based there. So I started the discussions, and there were very complicated discussions with the Congolese, but in the final analysis, we reached an agreement, first of all, to cease fire there was a ceasefire agreement signed between UNITA and Angola. Now, choosing the venue to where to sign it, the president of Angola, he wanted it signed in Luanda. Dr. Savimbi wanted it signed in Bailondo. So I said, well, let's compromise. Let's sign it in Lusaka. And it was signed in Lusaka. And it is the first time the two leaders had shaken hands from the same country, leaders from the same country. They had never shaken hands before. They shook hands for the first time at State House. They didn't even want to stay in the same hotel. They didn't want to stay in the same hotel during the discussions we had. And at a reception which I hosted for them at my house when I was living in Roma, I hosted the reception for them without telling the other group that they would be there. So they met there, and the UN group was there. And I saw that they started hugging each other. And say, oh, Minister, I was at university with this one in Portugal. This one was with me at high school. So why are you refusing to talk to each other? You know each other, and you are all Angolans. No? So after that, things become a little bit easier. No? But I had to I had to get them together through this process of having a reception where they didn't know that they would meet. And they ended up meeting, and they ended up shaking hands. And I said, and I let them talk. They talked to each other. I think from the reception started at 18:30. They continued talking to each other about olden days until after midnight. When they went back to their hotels, I said, well, so why are they refusing to talk to each other? They know each other. And after that, things became different, things changed, and they became to cooperate with one another, and then we started talking about power sharing. The second round of the talks was about power, and it was after a lot of commuting between Bailondo and Luanda. They agreed that they would include some UNITA elements in the MPLA government of national unity in Luanda, and that Savimbi would become a vice president instead of having two vice presidents. One vice president, they would have two vice presidents, one from MPLA, one from UNITA, and that was agreed. And in the process of that being implemented, Dr. Savimbi died. He was shot and killed. There was a lot of speculation as to who was responsible for his death, but the investigations which were made by us, our people, and cooperating intelligence agencies in the neighborhood revealed that the agent who shot Dr. Savimbi, the agent who shot him, was not sent by the Rwandese, the government in Rwanda. Not Rwanda, but Luanda, L-U-A. He was shot by one of his own people who opposed the signing of this agreement, which would have led to power sharing in Rwanda, which involved the two. And after Dr. Savimbi was shot, the agreement again died, because the others said that, well, they were not part of this agreement and they wanted to remain where they were. The members of parliament who had been elected were not able to even go to Rwanda where the parliament was, to sit in parliament, because they said that they had no guarantees of security to go to Rwanda. So that led to new negotiations now to allow them to go to Rwanda, to go. Africa is a continent which has given some of us a lot of problems. But the satisfaction is that we have developed capacity as Africans to resolve our own problems. There is domestic capacity to resolve, because these problems were resolved by me and my officials. We didn't have to rely on Europeans or Americans to come and head these. We did it ourselves without their involvement.
Yeah, I think that's truly wonderful, and it shows how your Pan-African attitude led to a lot of liberty in a lot of African countries. So now let's zone into our own country, Zambia, and talk about the political scene with political parties and the movement for multi-party democracy, with a question from one of our own panelists.
Dr. Mwaanga, it is to my knowledge that you are a founding member of the MMD. And as such, you got to meet with other national figures such as the President, Dr. Frederick Chiluba. Now, my question for you is that in the formation of MMD, was it mainly seen as a political party, or did it simply begin as a broader movement for national multi-party democracy renewal? And if so, when was it decided that this would become a party, and whose idea was it for it to become a party?
Well, in 1990, there were growing signs that the people of Zambia are getting impatient with the one-party system. The one-party system was introduced. It was first of all announced by Dr. Kaunda in 1972. And I remember the announcement, the beginning of the announcement said, my cabinet and I have decided that Zambia shall be a one-party state. My cabinet and I have decided that Zambia shall be a one-party state. I'm appointing a commission of inquiry to go around the country, not to determine whether Zambia should be a one-party state or not, because that decision has already been made, but to determine what type of one-party system the people of Zambia want to have. So the commission was appointed in 1972. It was headed by Mainza Chona. And the deputy chairman, I remember, was Humphrey Mulemba. And they went around the country. And each time people wanted to say, but what about, why are we having one party? You know? They said, no, that decision has already been made. Just tell us what type of one-party system we want. That's what people were being told, those who wanted to question the one-party system. Anyway, finally, in 1973, the one-party elections were held, and there was MMD. There was UNIP, was the only political party in the Constitution of Zambia which was recognized as a political party. Article 4, to be exact, of the Constitution of Zambia recognized only one political party, that was UNIP. And that governed from 1973 until 1991. 1990, a lot of pressure was being put on the one-party system. There were also other issues, secondary issues, which arose. There were a lot of shortages of goods in the country. Milling was in short supply, cooking oil was in, bread was in short supply, butter was in short supply, washing powder was in short supply, bathing soap was in short supply, and women were queuing outside from 4 a.m. in the morning just to buy a bar of soap or to buy sugar, which was in short supply. And we had food riots for the first time in our country. They started on the Copper Belt and spread to Lusaka. So it became obvious that there was a a Ramadan of discontent in the country with the one-party system and the way it was performing. So a number of Zambians, that included people like Akashamba Twambiku Sitaliwanika, Derek Chitala, now called Mbita Chitala, and others, were saying that there was need for this issue to be reviewed. And it was decided that there should be a conference to discuss the multi-party option brought about, which was called by MMD, Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, which was an NGO, a non-governmental organization. Because other political parties were not allowed to be formed under the one-party system. Shortly before that, I had had a discussion myself with Dr. Kaunda, who was my mentor. I had two mentors, Dr. Kaunda and also President Nyerere of Tanzania. I said, Mr. President, I think we should consider having a referendum to enable the people of Zambia decide whether we should continue as one party or become a multi-party state. And he became very, very angry with me, Dr. Kaunda. So I told him, well, if you are not interested in that, with effect from this afternoon, you will have my resignation. And in the afternoon, I took my resignation and I resigned from UNIP. And I became part of the organizers. And in fact, I funded the first meeting of the MMD to discuss the multi-party option, which was held at Garden House in Lusaka West. And we invited a number of people to come and discuss the multi-party option. And a number of people were scared to come because they thought that they would be arrested. You know? And some were emerging from the bushes, you know, around Garden House, coming through the back door of the Garden House to come to the meeting. And we went there freely ourselves. We didn't really care whether we were going to be arrested or not. So at that conference, it was decided that there should be an executive committee, an interim executive committee of 8 people formed to continue the campaign to continue the campaign for multi-party democracy in Zambia, rather than one party. And then they elected the late Arthur Winner. I don't know how many of you, have you heard of Arthur Winner? The elder brother to the late Scotta Winner, as interim chairman. He had 2 vice chairmen, elected 2 vice chairmen, Frederick Chiluba and myself. The secretary, interim secretary, was Akashamba Twambiku Sitaliwanika. The chairman of the legal committee was Levi Mwanawasa. The chairman of the finance committee was Ephraim Chibwe. The chairman of the transport committee, interim transport committee, was the late Andrew Kashita. And the chairman of the national security, interim national security committee was Kelly Walubita. You know. That made the 8 of us, who are the ones now who are supposed to take charge of the civil campaign to fight for multi-party politics. Now, before that, I went to Tanzania to see President Nyerere, you know, because having 2 presidential mentors, I had to explain to him the reasons why I resigned. And I went to Tanzania. I called the State House Tanzania, and they told me that the president was going to see me. So they said I should send my details, travel details, which I did. They met me at the airport and housed me in Kilimanjaro Hotel. And they said, your appointment with the president is at 17 hours. So they came to pick me up, and I went to see President Nyerere. So the 2 of us sat in the garden, you know, outside. I said, Mr. President, I wanted to see you because I didn't want you to read about my resignation only through the media. I wanted to tell you why I'd resigned. I resigned because of asking President Kaunda to ask the people of Zambia to decide in a referendum whether we should remain one party or go multi-party. Since around the world, countries were all moving towards multi-party. He says, that is very good. Why did he refuse? I said, I don't know. He refused and he was very angry with me. So he said, but here in Tanzania, we're going to have a referendum. I said, oh, that's good. You better talk to your friend. He said, your brother. I said, oh, yes, I'll talk to him. So I managed to talk to him, and I returned from Tanzania. And after the two leaders, they talked, he then called me. I got a call from State House. And he said, oh, the president wants to speak to you. I said, oh, the president wants to speak to me. He said. So he came on the phone and said, good morning, young man. I said, good morning, sir. How are you? And I'm fine. Do you have time? I would like to see you today. I said, today? I said, what time? You gave me a time, 17. I said, yeah, I'll be there. So I went there. And he told me that, oh, you have been to see your other mentor? I said, yes, I did. I wanted to tell him why I resigned. Why I resigned. Disagreements with you over multi-party issues. He said, yeah, okay. I've thought about it. I have now decided that we are going to have a referendum in Zambia. I said, oh, that is very good. If we have a referendum, then that is excellent. We will campaign for a yes vote. And I said, and we'll register in accordance with the law under the Referendum Commission to register as campaigning for a yes vote. So we registered. The referendum was called, and we registered, and we went around the country. I think those of you who are old enough will remember that we had some of the biggest rallies ever seen in this country, everywhere. 6 days before the referendum, I got a call from State House. Young man, I would like to see you urgently. Urgently. I was supposed to leave for Mongo to go and address rallies there for yes votes. So I cancelled that and I went to State House. And he said, we have seen that people are interested they want multi-party, it seems. I said, yes, I told you that people wanted multi-party when you were angry with me. He said, first of all, I want to begin by apologizing to you the way I treated you when you came. I said, well, it's all right. I don't hold it against you. If there's something I said which angered you, I also want to ask for your forgiveness. So I said, I've decided that we cannot win this referendum or no vote, so I would like to cancel the referendum. Said, what? Cancel the referendum? I said, what are you going to put in its place? He says, I'm going to ask Parliament to amend Article 4 of the Constitution to allow other political parties to register. I said, well, that's fine. That achieves the same objective. It should have been done earlier. I said, okay, well, I am for it. I said, I'll go and inform my colleagues that this is what has been decided. And but when are you making the announcement? He said, this evening. I said, okay. And for sure, in the evening, he announced that the referendum was cancelled. The Parliament would be asked to amend Article 4. And then we saw the Gazette, which contained the amendment to Article 4. Because under the law, before that could be taken to Parliament for amendment, it had to be gazetted for a minimum of 30 days. A minimum of 30 days. It had to be gazetted for a minimum of 30 days. So we said, okay, let's wait and see what happens in 30 days. After 30 days, yes, it went to Parliament. Parliament debated it, and Parliament approved it. It was signed into law on the 27th of December 1990. And on the 4th of January 1991, we registered MMD now as a political party. There were arguments amongst ourselves, the leaders, whether we should register MMD or form another party. And I said to them, if we form another party, someone will adopt this name and register it as a party. And then we'll have to begin explaining to people that, no, it's not that one, our party is this one. I said, no, we just register MMD as a political party. And then how are we going to decide on leadership? Leadership, president. So the inner circle met, they said, between you, Vijay, and Frederick Chiluba, we want one of you to be our party president, and eventually our Republican president. But we know that you are good friends, because we don't want Arthur Wina. Arthur Wina doesn't represent what we stand for. You agree with Frederick Chiluba. I said, okay, we'll discuss it. And they didn't know that Frederick Chiluba was staying in my house at that time, because having been president of ZCTU, he was based in Ndola. So each time there was an MMD meeting, he had to come from Ndola to Lusaka, and he stayed in my house. So I said, we'll discuss the matter, So after that meeting, we discussed the matter. We went to the house. After supper, we went into my office, and we discussed the matter. And I said, my brother, for me, there's nothing to discuss. I'm not interested in the presidency. I'm going to propose you as president. And I'll be there to support you from the beginning right up to the end. He said, no, but I was going to propose you. You have had more experience than me. You've been an ambassador, you've been a permanent secretary, you've been Director General of the National Intelligence Service, you've been this. I said, no, experience you gain on the job. I will support you. I am not interested in the job. I've worked with presidents. I know what they go through. I don't want to go through it. And the meeting ended in 20 minutes. We had agreed that I would propose him. We went back to the meeting the following day. I said, we have agreed unanimously that Frederick Chiluba should be president of MMD. And the decision was unanimous, so they clapped. And so we went for elections, MMD elections. Chiluba was elected. We said, but we won't stop other people who want to stand. There were 4 other candidates who stood. The MMD constitution, which had been drafted by Levi Mwanawasa and his committee, said that for a party president to become elected, she or he must have 51% of the votes, not 50 plus 1. The MMD constitution said 51%. So we said, okay. There were 3 other candidates who stood. Humphrey Mulemba stood, Edward Shamana stood for president, and we had Frederick Chiluba himself. We had four presidential candidates. So I stood for chairman for international relations. I had 5 other people contesting. So the first results the commission announced, the electoral commission, was that of the presidency. Chiluba had 63.4% of the vote on the first ballot. So he was elected on the first ballot. And the others fell away. Shamana had 2%, and the others 7%. They shared the rest, Humphrey Mulemba and the others. And I had 87%. The 13% was shared by the other 5 candidates. So that was decided. Then we had to start campaigning for fresh elections under the new constitution. And finally, after KK had resisted, he announced that we're going to have elections on the 31st of October 1991. And he said, look, Vijay, Chiluba, these are my boys. I'm the one who brought them up. They can't defeat me in an election. He said, oh, okay, Amdara. Wakofa Pasazivika, let's go. Let's see who the people are going to win, who are going to choose. So he announced those elections. I was put in charge of the MMD elections. We started campaigning, choosing candidates, and chose candidates, and elections were held. And come the results, MMD had 125 seats out of 150. UNIP 25. Presidential vote, Chiluba 74%, KK 24%. So the issue was decided.
Yes.
That there is going to be a change of government, and I was put in charge of the transition to make sure that the ministers from UNIP were handing over power peacefully to MMD ministers. And I had to go to State House, sit down with President Kaunda. I asked him, how much time do you need to pack and leave? Since you have been here for 27 years, how much time should we give you? We don't want to be seen as if we are pushing you. We don't want to do that. We want it to be done in a civilized way. So he said, well, 10 to 14 days. 10 to 14, I said, okay, we'll give you 4 weeks. We'll give, we'll let President Chiluba stay in the Vice President's residence temporarily while waiting for you to get prepared, which is what happened. So I asked President Kaunda, how are you going to manage to live? Have you made enough money to live on since you have been in power 27 years, and you made no provision for former presidents? There's nothing in the law. He said, I don't know how I'm going to live. I said, do you have enough money? He said, to tell you the truth, I don't have enough money. So he asked the senior private secretary to bring a bank statement. They brought a bank statement, and Dr. Kaunda gave it to me. I looked at it. There was a total of $8,100. $8,100. 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He says, that's all the money I have. I said, don't tell me that that's all the money. He said, yeah, that's all. I said, but the perception out there is that you have made a lot of money. He did it the African way, touching the ground. He says, you have been Director General of the Intelligence Service. Ask the Intelligence Service to investigate if I have got money anywhere. I didn't tell him that I would, but I did. And they came back with the same statement I had already seen. And nothing else. They checked everywhere. Switzerland, UK, with other intelligence services, there was nothing. I said, my goodness. I said, so how are you going to manage? He said, I don't know, by the grace of God. I said, you should also remember that God helps those who help themselves. That's when I went to President Chiluba and said, no, we need a law to give benefits to former presidents. I've been to countries where they give benefits to former presidents, and I think that we need to enact that law here. And we agreed, and that's how that law came into being.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mwaanga. Now, let's have a short break while we can rest and simply get ready for our next and final segment.